Welcome back to Intentionality with Paul Kempff, where we explore how to live life more purposefully in your mind, with your money, and with your life. And today we're going to be diving into an interesting intersection between these three ideas. And we're going to be doing it by firstly looking at how you build and grow successful businesses, not just for profit, but in a way that truly aligns with your deepest values and the life you want to live. And secondly, most importantly, we're going to look at how you do this in the exceptionally challenging environment that is business in South Africa today. Intentionality with Paul Kempff, for people who lead with intention and live with impact. I am thrilled to welcome to IWPK Rowan De Klerk. Welcome, Rowan.
Thanks, Paul. Really pleased to be with you today.
So Rowan is the CEO of the CFO Center. We know each other through business, Rowan, but maybe we can start off this interview by you telling us what it is that the CFO Center actually does.
Sure. The CFO Center outsources CFO services. And what does a CFO do? Well, they look at the strategic finances, they look at the operational finances, and commercial, how does that integrate with the commercial elements of the business? So it's not your day-to-day accountant, it's not your auditor type, but it's more of a forward-looking approach to finance, and how can we make finance work for us and help us take our businesses forward, which is really good financial leadership at the end of the day. How does that work with the business strategy?
Okay, now we're both sitting here today as CEOs. You CEO of the CFO Center, I'm the CEO of FFG. But in our preparation for this interview, we agreed that what we're going to try and do today is not just be here as the CEOs of two particular businesses in South Africa. We are going to try and share some of our personal opinions as CEOs, but also as South African citizens, about not only what it takes to be successful in business, to grow a successful business in South Africa, but also more importantly about the challenges that we are facing in South Africa, the interesting, challenging business environment that we find ourselves in South Africa. So I'm looking forward to some of your opinions about business and about doing business in South Africa today, Rowan.
When is business ever easy? I mean, we find ourselves in tough economic, political challenges. And I think for South African businesses, we've been facing trials for many years. You know, if we look at COVID and those years and how we had to kind of reinvent ourselves, pivot as the word became. And so uncertainty is always with us as business leaders. And then there's the controllables. So how do we manage our controllables well so that the uncertainty can then be looked at in a best guess type of world, you know? And I think CFOs can help with that because they look ahead and it's looking at scenarios of what you might face and how to deal with those.
No, very true. And one of the things that I think does characterize South Africans and South African businesses and South African business owners is the resilience with which we handle this uncertainty and these setbacks and challenges that we face every day in South Africa. I think we're famous for our resilience.
Absolutely. And I think it gets tested all the time. You know, it's like taking the top military, you know, governments, or let's say the top military setups in the countries around the world, you know, and looking at why they're so strong. Because they get tested. And I think ours has been tested, you know, for many years. I travel a lot and I look at entrepreneurs in other countries all around the world. I mean, the CFO Center has a presence in 20 countries. And maybe I'm a bit biased, but I always like to think that, you know, South African entrepreneurs can really stand up to the best of them out there because of the ways we've had to be tested. I mean, when times are tough, they're even tougher here. You know, when people had COVID packages or COVID relief, we didn't have COVID relief, you know, all of those things. So I think entrepreneurs have learned how to work things out and how to come up with answers through failure as well. You know, I think sometimes we see failure and adversity as something evil, where it's actually opposite. I mean, I started my business in times of adversity, and it kind of brought out the best in me, I suppose, at the time. And here I sit 15 years later, and it's a healthy business. And I think it's thanks to some of those tough times and some of those experiences that didn't go so well, because you learn way more in the hard times and the failures, the semi-failures, the demi-failures, I can call it that, because a failure is never complete and never final, only if you decide not to get back up. But as long as you get back up, that failure is never final. So I think that's probably the case with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. One of the things I know about you is that you're very passionate about inspiring and coaching business leaders and entrepreneurs. Do you have any practical, actionable advice for leaders and entrepreneurs listening in on this podcast today about what you can do to grow your business, to grow personally?
I think it's always, a leader running a business, and it's how does this leader look at their own life, and what is the setup of their own life. If I look at myself, it's, I like balance. I like to find that balance between work and play, between, physical exercise, what I eat, my spiritual life, my family life, all of that needs to have a balance in it. And if you can bring that balance and cultural mindset into your business, I think that's a good secret or ingredient for success, because you're always going to be working with people, and it's how do you engage with the people that you bring into your business. And that's one of the key ingredients, because normally when you start the business, there's nothing. There's a few people and yourself. And it's then growing those people to work with you and take that forward. So that's one of the things I would always say is, what is the culture? And what are you building around that culture? And then the finances can be worked out after that. The business model needs to be sound and strategy, etc. But you're always working with people, and it's about inspiring people, about leading people.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, you're right. CFOs, they bring financial strategy. They're responsible for managing the cash flow, which is so crucial in a business. But it's about more than that. If entrepreneurs and business leaders want to fulfill their hopes and dreams and the hopes and dreams of the people they employ, it goes beyond basic financial strategy. It becomes a much more personal picture. And I think you're right. Balance is so incredibly important in that picture.
Absolutely. And purpose. As I say, people typically start something because they have a belief. They really have a strong conviction of, this is what I need to do with my life. And when people get to that stage, they have to fulfill that. And it's not so much about the money. They end up making money. And I always say, if you put one foot in front of the other and you keep doing the same thing and you keep doing it well, the money will follow. Gary Player always used to say, the harder I work, the luckier I get. The harder I try, the luckier I get. And I think it's true with every business. As you walk down the road of that industry, of that business, and you collect experience and people and relationships and everything, more opportunities come towards you because you've spent time and effort in that world, in that space. And if you believe in it, all the more. Take a passionate sports person or someone who's passionate about a hobby. You're attracted to that because it's someone's passion that attracts you. And I think business owners really would every now and then take pause to go back to why they started their businesses in the first place, and to try and find that excitement, that adventure, sense of adventure they had when they started, and bring that back into the business. How do they reinculcate that? Because you can then re-enliven and refresh what you originally had. In other words, unlearn and go and relearn some of the stuff you started with and bring that back in.
So you write a newsletter. It's called The Financial Edge. In one of the latest editions of this newsletter, I read a little bit about some of the psychological aspects of leadership that you speak about. And there's one of them that really got my attention, something that's very personal to me. And that is your thoughts on leaders in business having to remain optimistic, having to remain positive. Maybe tell me a little bit more about why you think that's important.
I think sentiment is often something that drives the start. It kicks off trends, sentiment. People feel strongly about something and they move in that direction. Or they see the signs that are pointing towards something and they move. It's like the stock markets. they're often driven by sentiment before the fundamentals kick in. It's the same with business. When people move into a landscape or environment that is favorable to that business, they'll obviously kick off and start doing things. So it's like investments, where it's safe to put your money, you're going to put your money there because you believe it's. So I would say that optimism sits in the middle of what we call fake positivity. And fake positivity is someone who just has this forced mindset of, I will be positive regardless of whatever's going on. But in that sense, we can miss some of the shortcomings of what's going on around, and some of the risk factors and some of the things on the ground that need to be taken cognizance of. On the other side, you've got the pessimist who's just in the pit all day long thinking about what's going wrong and playing out the fears. In the middle, you have the optimist who's actually a realist, who looks at what's actually happening and is mindful of that, tries to step out of emotion and ego and woe is me and I'm going to be victimized by the situation, and then starts to look at what challenges and what opportunities and how I can actually exploit these in today's world. And it's calm, it's collected, it's not a forced thing, but it really will drive, and it can drive sentiment forward, and it can help your staff and others. It's quite catchy, I think.
I love it. So one of the things that I find very interesting is, in order to grow, you need investment. South Africa's got a problem in terms of where do we find the money? Where do we find the investments to continue growing? Now, recently I listened to a presentation by Kevin Lings, the chief economist at Stanlib. And in that presentation, he spoke at length about where would we find investment in South Africa. And there were three graphs in particular that he shared during this presentation that I would just want to briefly mention. The first one was how foreign direct investment in South Africa over the last decade has reduced. So certainly getting foreign investment into South Africa is something that would help us grow, but that is something that is not happening at the moment. We are not an attractive investment opportunity for the rest of the world at the moment, which means it becomes a difficult source of revenue to keep on growing, to do things in this country. The second graph that he showed was around the fact that government is running out of money. I don't think that's something we have to discuss in detail. We're fully aware of it. We've seen it in the budget again recently with the VAT increase that they want to put through in order to get more revenue into government. So certainly expecting government to come up with the money for investment in all kinds of things, infrastructure, businesses, is going to be difficult. He also mentioned the fact that if you look at South African household, at the South African consumer, they are also severely financially distressed, which means expecting South African consumers to be able to help us find the money to invest by, let's say, spending more is also going to be very difficult. Which literally brings us to the last graph he showed us, and probably the only place where we can expect to find money in South Africa to be able to do investments. And that's South African corporates. And that's what we're talking about here today. Because the last graph he showed, which was really interesting, was the fact that currently in South Africa, there is about 1.4 trillion rand in corporate deposits. That's money lying on the balance sheets of companies in South Africa, money that could be used to restart growth in this country of ours. But that's not being spent, that's not being invested by companies, specifically because of the confidence that I spoke about earlier, the fact that they don't have confidence. I believe it is incredibly important for us to find a way for government and business to work together to create that confidence that would be necessary to unlock this potential investment into our economy that could help our economy grow. And as you've just said, it's not just about the big businesses out there that sits with this 1.4 trillion in cash on their balance sheets. It's also about the small companies and what they can do to help the South African economy grow. I think it's crucial that we find a way of unlocking that potential in this economy in the next few years?
Absolutely agree with you. Again, it's government always used to do everything on their own, make decisions on their own, try to do everything unilaterally, separately. This has to become collaborative. Business has to get involved with government. We talk about PPPs or public-private partnerships. They haven't really flourished. There's something going on with Transnet now and some of the new rail developments. We need water infrastructure, we need electrical infrastructure, all of that. But it's not going to happen with government funding on its own. Absolutely not. And international funding is becoming more expensive because of the international situation, the depreciation of the rand, etc. So I think we've got to, and again, it's about collaboration. From the SME sector perspective, big businesses often can't grow jobs. They're all rationalizing. They're sitting with their number of employees, and now the payroll's a big component to manage, in any business, major business like that. But SMEs can grow payroll, can grow staff. It's easy for someone to grow their staff from 5 to 10 or from 10 to 20 rather than from 5,000 to 10,000. So that's where the growth in jobs could come in the SME sector. But how will it come? Through cheaper funding, through lowering interest rates, through getting proper venture capital and cheaper funding out to SMEs so they can grow. That's how America grew their SME sector of the economy. So again, we've got all opportunity, but it's to bring those things about. I think there are ways of doing it. Clever people can come up with creative ways of solving it, but it needs collaboration, and I don't think we've got to that yet.
Well, the one thing I hope that we can get out of this episode today, out of this conversation that you and I are having, is to maybe inspire more CEOs out there, more business leaders out there, to start these conversations, to start talking about the things that is sometimes dangerous to talk about, but that could help us to achieve exactly what it is that you're referring to now.
Mm. And you talk about dangerous, but is there not also danger of losing what you've got because you're too safe and too cautious? And I think we've got to that point. What does it take for people to riot on the streets? What does it take for people to uprise? So it's time to speak up before those things happen, before collapse, and things like that, which I'm not saying going to happen tomorrow, but, that's a necessary end of some of the things that are going on in a country like ours. Unless people speak up, unless people are prepared to actually put money where their mouth is and do something about it. The Adrian Gores of this world, as you spoke about, I think one of his projects was to say, I'm going to take out every pothole in Johannesburg because the government's not doing it. And he went ahead and did it off his own balance sheet. And that type of thing, it takes serious leaders that are committed and invested in the country. There's other initiatives, the Josie My Josie initiative, which is going on. It's a rebuilding of Johannesburg, and that's all private enterprise. It's big business that's trying to rebuild Johannesburg or parts of Johannesburg. Those sorts of initiatives can be kicked off by 1 or 2 or 3 CEOs to start, and then they flourish from there, and you start to see improvement and things going on. We've seen it. We've seen sectors of brilliance and excellence, even in municipalities. Look at some of the Cape Town ones. I know they can be a bit tricky for political parties to swallow, but certain of the Cape Town metropoles are run beautifully. Why can't that be extended to the rest of the country? Why can't we learn from each other instead of the egos bumping heads all the time and everybody getting upset with each other? It's time to put that aside. If you look at economies like Singapore, Hong Kong, places like that built themselves out of nothing and are flourishing economies today because the people invested, the government invested, and they collaborated and they built something worthwhile instead of the infighting and the petty inward looking and everybody trying to protect their own little turf. I think the time is gone, whether you're trying to protect your race or protect your business or protect your politics. It's time to actually work together. That's the only answer.
You've hit the nail on the head. Get rid of the egos. Let's start collaborating, working together, trying to find the answer to the problem, trying to find the solution for South Africa. I like that idea. One of the other things you spoke about in your newsletter that caught my attention was you said CFOs need to play more golf and pay for it. Now, I'm sincerely hoping that you meant CFOs and CEOs, but maybe you can just explain that comment quickly.
I think traditionally the CFO has been the guy who stays in the office, the cautious, he works with his back office team and he makes sure that everything runs well at home in the office. And nowadays, it's the modern CFO. Business is tied up so integrally with suppliers, with customers. The value chains are connected. Through different businesses in the industries that they work in, and without those connections, they don't flourish as businesses. So, if you're having problems with suppliers, well, what's it about? Relationships. Same on the customer front. If you can't get paid by big customers, it's about relationships. So what my advice was, and that article essentially was, get out and network, get to know who your customers and suppliers are, your other stakeholders, your shareholders, some of your staff, maybe your executive team. Start doing some social stuff and building relationships so that when the time comes to draw on those relationships, so to speak, you've built them, and you can then call on them and help achieve some business imperatives rather than just getting stuck in the numbers, so to speak, at the office.
Yeah, I like the idea. It's something we've recently started looking at again in our company, is reaching out to our clients and really spending some time with them. Not necessarily on the golf course, but not taking your clients for granted, not taking the relationship you have with your clients for granted, really spending time with them, getting to know them, making sure that you are still fulfilling their specific needs, that it's not something that started 2-3 years ago and the needs might have changed and you haven't kept up with what it is that they actually want from you. I think that's absolutely crucial in business. And of course, if we can get a round or two of golf in every now and then, that's an absolute bonus.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, the FFG Group of Companies. Take another step into living a more intentional life by being more intentional with your finances and insurance. As a trusted provider of a wide range of financial services, the FFG Group offers innovative, tailored solutions that help companies and individuals thrive and flourish. They are an amazing company that I believe in because they embody intentionality in everything they do, and I'm proud to partner with them. FFG is an authorized financial services provider. Ready to take the next step? Click the link below and start making better, more intentional financial decisions, or visit their website. Remember, with FFG, you create the memories, we ensure the journey.
All right. Rowan, the name of this podcast is Intentionality with Paul Kempff. It's all about being more intentional, living a life of purpose. Is there anything that you can share with the audience, something that you maybe do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, very intentionally, that helps you to succeed, that helps you to grow personally in your business, that helps you to stay positive, to stay optimistic?
I think there are quite a few things in my personal life which then translate into business, and I could probably summarize them. I called them the F score, and it's things like faith, fitness, family, food, your finances, looking ahead, forward thinking, fortitude, and failure. How do you handle failure? So just as some of those things in my life are important to me, and I'll just touch on a few of them because we haven't got time for everything, but faith, what is your spiritual relationship with yourself and with God, if you've got that? What is your how do you look at fitness, your health, your physical health, the mind, body, spirit stuff? What do you eat? How important is food to you? Those sorts of things. The disciplines of daily life transcend your daily life into your business. There's a very strong parallel with the way you live your personal life. And I like balance. That's very important for me. But the intentionality aspects around those things that I've mentioned are very important. Things like reflection, I'll just choose one of those. If we want to change anything in our personal life, or our business, it's looking back and seeing, the hindsight thing, what's gone on, and how in an unattached or a detached way, how can I observe what's happened and pick out what went well and what didn't go so well, and what am I going to do to change those things? There's a little tool we use both in personal and business context called Stop, Start, Continue. What are the things that I observe that I would want to stop because they're just not working for me or my business anymore? What are the things that I see that are working and I want to continue and do more of those? We've just been through an exercise like this in our business. And then what are the new things that I would like to start because I see them as something that's been kind of prodding me for a while that I should get into this and start this. And it's a way of refreshing yourself without making drastic changes. You can simply drop off a few things aren't working and take on a few more things that could potentially work. And then of course test them before you just jump into something. Test and measure it a little bit for yourself or for your business. So those are kind of some of the things that I do. Yeah.
I love it. I love all those F's that you mentioned. It really fits in well with a lot of the things that we've discussed in previous episodes on this podcast. So thank you for that. Rowan, we've actually reached the end of this interview. The only thing that's left now is the tip of the week. So the tip of the week is something I started from episode 1, where every single episode I try and leave the audience with something to take away, something inspiring. It's often a book that I've read. Sometimes it's a movie. Sometimes it's just a great quote that I've heard. And when I have guests for an interview, I like to ask my guests to do the tip of the week. Any chance that you have a tip of the week, something that you can share with us to end off this interview today?
Sure. So it's a little story about an elephant and a rider, and it's how do we change? Because human beings are we always want to make some changes, and it's quite difficult because on the surface you can agree, for example, that I'm going to go running every day, I'm going to go to gym every second day or whatever. But after a certain period of time, that falls off, and you wonder why. Why did I do this for a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and it didn't happen for a longer term? It's because sometimes we make choices based on emotion, based on an ego reflex that's in us, and we haven't actually considered these things at deeper layers. And so the story of the elephant and the rider is when the rider gets on the elephant and he wants the elephant to move in a particular direction, it's quite difficult. Elephants are very skittish animals, actually, although they're quite large. They'll tend to do what they want to do. And the story goes that the only way the elephant starts to move in the direction that the rider wants is when the rider starts to get calm down. First of all, they can pick up anxiety, they can pick up frustration and all those negative emotions, anger. But when the rider calms down and is able to get in sync with the animal and to start to feel what the animal's feeling and become more one with that animal, they are then able, if you speak to these elephant riders, they are able to maneuver the animal in the way they want that animal to move. And so it's about being calm, it's about being collected, it's about stepping back from things, considering them properly, and then stepping into something because it's the right thing to do, because you're properly convicted and there's a proper calling inside of you. I want to even use that word of why you're doing something, as opposed to just following a trend, following something on social media on what others are doing, or being caught up in the uncertainty of the day and jumping into something that business people are telling you to do, but rather to step back and do the thing that you feel convicted of doing. And then hence the rider moves with the elephant, and you then move in a harmonious direction, which doesn't falter easily and chop and change and move around. So that's my little tip for the day.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I think what we can say here is all of us as business leaders are the riders of these elephants, these businesses, and I think we can even take this analogy a little bit further. Our government, our president, is the rider of this elephant, and if we can just get into harmony, the way that we've spoken about today, I think that's a great example of exactly how we will be able to get this elephant moving in the direction that we want it to be moving in. So yes, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, pleasure.
Rowan, it's been great. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your valuable insights. It was fantastic having you on Intentionality with Paul Kempff today.
Pleasure talking to you, Paul. I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
So that's it for this episode today. Thanks for joining. And until our next episode, stay intentional.
Thanks for watching Intentionality with Paul Kempff. Like, subscribe, and click that bell to get notified when we release more episodes on how to live a life of intention and purpose. See you next time.